Hello dear viewers who are curious about space. This video is a compilation video of space-related news dated June 4th. To watch the latest news, pause the video for 3 seconds and subscribe to the channel. First news from Washington. Iridium secures $94 million U.S. Space Force contract for satellite communication support. Iridium Communications, a provider of mobile satellite communications, on June 4th announced a new 5-year contract valued at $94 million, with a potential total value of $103 million, to provide communication support services to the U.S. Department of Defense. The contract, awarded by the Space Systems Command's Commercial Space Office, COMSO, within the U.S. Space Force, is for ground infrastructure services in support of the Enhanced Mobile Satellite Services (EMSS) program. EMSS is a program designed specifically for the DoD and approved users that provides communication services through Iridium's satellite network. The program is like a giant DoD family plan for global satellite communications, offering unlimited voice calls and narrowband data transmissions. Service Center for DoD users. The new $94 million contract is called ECS-3, short for EMSS Capabilities and Security Sustainment Services, and supports the EMSS Service Center, which facilitates communication across the Iridium network. It replaces a previous 4.5-year contract known as E-Gateway Maintenance Support Services Agreement, signed in 2019 for $54 million. The current 7-year EMSS contract, awarded in September 2019, is worth $738.5 million through 2026. The new ECS-3 contract would support the infrastructure used for EMSS through 2029. Our second news is from San Francisco. Revolv Space seeks to expand satellite duty cycles. Startup Revolv Space, based in the Netherlands and Italy, seeks to carve out a niche for itself as a small satellite power generation specialist. After raising €2.6 million, $283 million, in a recent investment round and space qualifying its first product, Revolv Space is looking into innovative ways of generating power, like flexible solar arrays and rollout arrays. Filippo Ogioni, Revolv co-founder and chief commercial officer, told Space News. 4 Delft University of Technology students founded Revolv in 2022 to develop the type of mechanisms and moving parts common on large satellites for the growing small satellite market. In late May, Revolv announced the investment round led by Primo Ventures of Italy's Primo Space Fund and supported by Italy's Takeoff Accelerator. Nowadays, small satellite operators care a lot about performance, Ogioni said. With increasing performance, you need different technologies. Companies have sprung up to supply small satellite reaction wheels, antennas, and propulsion systems. What was still missing were the power generation technologies, Ogioni said. There has been little innovation in solar arrays. That's why we started with a mechanism that points the solar arrays to the sun to maximize power generation. Sarah Solar Array Drive Assembly, or SARA, Revolv Space's first product, was space qualified in March. Now, SARA has been delivered to 2 customers in preparation for an initial launch in late 2024 or early 2025. That's only the first step in the bigger ecosystem of our products that we want to build, Ogioni said. Overall, Revolv Space is focused on products to help satellites extend their duty cycles. A lot of small satellites were only capable to work for 5% of the time they spend in orbit, Ogioni said. Clients want the platform to be operational for longer. An important step in that direction is being able to generate power while operating payloads. Synthetic aperture radar satellites, for example, are notoriously power-hungry. Even satellites with passive payloads seek additional power for onboard data processing, Ogioni said. We see different requirements from different areas converging to the same pattern. Satellites require more performance and among all subsystems, Ogioni said. It's more pressing on the power side. Funding round. With the latest funding, Revolv Space is preparing for in-orbit demonstrations of SARA, In addition, the company is expanding its staff and facilities. "We are boosting our production capabilities to serve larger customers," Ogioni said. "Not only orders of 1 or 2 products, but batch orders for constellations." A large version of SARA is also in the works for satellites with a mass of 500 kilograms or less. Revolv Space conducts research and development at the European Space Agency Business Incubation Center in Noordwijk, the Netherlands. Turin, Italy is the base for the company's product development, production, and commercialization work. Our third news is from San Francisco. Online calculator helps startups comply with U.S. regulations. Aegis Space Law is offering a free online calculator to help U.S. companies navigate the complex regulatory landscape. The Space Regulatory Calculator, unveiled June 4th, is designed to introduce early-stage space companies learn how to comply with space-related regulations from the Commerce Department, Federal Aviation Administration, Federal Communications Commission, National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and State Department. Aegis works with a lot of space startups. Bailey Reichelt, Aegis Space Law partner and co-founder, told Space News by email. "The common denominator is that they don't see regulations as something they need to plan for until they've gotten the engineering and financing in order. Unfortunately, the regulatory timelines can be much longer than the other timelines. Founders should consider regulatory approval as soon as they begin designing space systems and raising money to optimize the chances of that business succeeding," said Reichelt, who developed the Space Regulatory Calculator with Aegis partner Will Lewis. Costly mistakes. Failing to consider regulation early in the planning process can lead to costly and time-consuming mistakes. For example, a satellite company might select a foreign antenna array due to its price and ground station compatibility without realizing that the operating frequency would impose a lengthy and expensive regulatory burden, Reichelt said. In addition, federal acquisition regulations pertaining to an existing contracts sometimes bar foreign-sourced components. "This kind of setback happens all the time when you have no idea what regulations apply to you," Reichelt said. Legal advice. Traditionally, space companies have hired attorneys to determine which regulations applied to their work. Many new space companies cannot afford the sophisticated legal advice needed to navigate this many agencies, Reichelt said. This leaves companies vulnerable to missteps that can cost time and money. Regulatory missteps can even threaten the viability of the firm or its mission, she added. It's entirely unreasonable for a company with no cash flow to spend tens of thousands of dollars on lawyers before they even have paid employees, Reichelt said. If we want the space industry to succeed, if we want the U.S. technology sector to continue leading innovation globally, we have to drive down legal and regulatory barriers across the board. The Space Law Calculator is designed to help startups determine what kind of licenses and permits they will need, how long the approval process generally take, and what expenses they are likely to incur to ensure regulatory compliance. A small business looking to launch its first satellite, for example, would see, among other things, that it may need to plan at least 2 years in advance to ensure required licenses are obtained prior to launch, according to the news release. Aegis attorneys plan to update the Space Regulatory Calculator as regulations change. Attorneys with Washington-based Aegis Space Law helped establish the nonprofit Association of Commercial Space Professionals. In addition, Aegis attorneys teach at the association's Space Regulatory Boot Camp. Our fourth news is from Washington. Astra consolidates facilities Astra Space, still low on cash as it works to finalize a deal to take the company private, is consolidating its operations at its headquarters less than 2 years after expanding into a new facility. In a delayed quarterly filing with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, May 29th, Astra said it would relocate a satellite propulsion manufacturing facility in Sunnyvale, California, to its headquarters in Alameda, California, by the end of the third quarter of the year. Astra didn't give a reason for the move, but it will likely result in lower costs for the company. The company announced in 2022 it would open a facility in Sunnyvale for its Astra spacecraft engine electric propulsion systems, allowing the company to devote its Alameda headquarters to work on launch vehicles. The company said the Sunnyvale facility opened in March 2023. Satellite thrusters now comprise the bulk of Astra's business, as the company has deferred work on a new launch vehicle, Rocket 4. The company reported just $3.9 million in revenue in 2023, which came exclusively from its satellite propulsion or space products unit. Astra reported $285,000 in revenue in the first quarter of 2024, again exclusively from its space products unit. The company reported an operating loss of $24.4 million for the quarter. The filing offered no updates on a deal Astra announced in March to take the company private for $0.50 per share. That deal, led by company co-founders Chris Kemp and Adam London, was scheduled to close sometime in the second quarter of the year. In its SEC filing, Astra said it ended the quarter with $6.6 million of cash and cash equivalents. However, $3.5 million of that was set aside as part of the deal to take the company private, and an additional $500,000 was restricted under terms of a customer contract until the company starts delivering thrusters to that customer, currently scheduled for November. Astra has continued to raise modest amounts of cash through the sale of convertible notes and stock warrants. However, if warned that if those injections of cash were interrupted, or if the deal to take the company private fell through, the company's operations and production plans will be further scaled back or curtailed, and the company may be required to file a Chapter 7 bankruptcy liquidation.
Our last news is from the capital, Washington. Congressional language alters plans for NASA's Habitable Worlds Observatory. Congressional language intended to accelerate work on a future NASA space telescope has the side effect of forcing the agency to disband a team it created to guide the mission's early development. NASA established last year 2 committees to support the early development of the Habitable Worlds Observatory, a large space telescope recommended by the Astro 2020 Decadal Survey and projected to launch no earlier than the early 2040. S1, the Technical Assessment Group, TAG, includes NASA personnel working on designs and key technologies for the spacecraft. The other, the Science Technology Architecture Review Team, START, includes primarily representatives from academia and industry to develop science objectives and instrument requirements for the mission. The 2 groups started working last fall, but at a third joint meeting of the committee's June 3rd in Baltimore, Mark Clampin, director of NASA's Astrophysics Division, said their efforts had been complicated by language in fiscal year 2024 omnibus spending bill enacted in March. The report accompanying the bill directed NASA to spend at least $10 million on Habitable Worlds Observatory this year, as well as establish a project office for it at the Goddard Space Flight Center. This came as a surprise, he said of the direction to establish the office. We've had to do some thinking about how we put that into a plan we can move forward with. While the provisions show strong interest by Congress in the mission, he said they have downsides as well, specifically reorganizing how NASA had intended to guide early development of the observatory. NASA created START with language requiring it to be disbanded when the project office is established, a provision intended to reduce conflicts of interest for future calls for industry contributions and science teams. Clampin said that provision would be enforced even with the earlier-than-expected creation of the project office. After consulting with the headquarters legal team, we've come to the conclusion that we have to disband the START right now, he said. We're required to do this because of all the legal concerns about conflicts going forward. That will not affect, he said, volunteer working groups that has been associated with START examining science cases for the observatory. "We do not want to lose all the work the working groups are doing," he said. "Those efforts will continue," reporting now directly to the project office, although Clampin said industry representatives on those working groups would need to step back to mitigate conflicts. NASA is in the process of setting up the Habitable Worlds Observatory Project Office at Goddard, with the goal of having it in place by the end of the fiscal year in September. "It's getting a lot of attention. We're getting a lot of 'are we there yet?' calls from the Hill," he said. "The early creation of the project office won't affect the overall plan for the observatory, including an initial focus on maturing the technology needed for it before formally starting its development. Don't think that this is a major change in approach or strategy. It's not," Clampin said. "That approach includes funding work on those key technologies." NASA announced May 31st it awarded 3 contracts with a combined value of $17.5 million to BAE Systems, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman to work on concepts such as ultra-stable optics and a deployable baffle for the telescope. Clampin added that the direction to establish the observatory's project office at Goddard doesn't mean that other NASA centers will be excluded from working on the mission. "This is direction that we got from Congress, and so we have to follow it, but we expect this to continue to be a very broad, diverse, and inclusive program going forward." Today's news is like this. If you want to be the first to watch the latest news and are curious, subscribe to the channel. Write your questions in the comments if you have. See you tomorrow.